Well, let's continue to unpack the story. We're joined this afternoon by Dominic White, who is a cybercrime expert. He's also director at Orange Cyberdefense. Dominic, good afternoon. It's great to have you with us on the program. We talk about cybercrime in a whole range of contexts, don't we? We've become sort of accustomed to things like phishing scams. Is it a whole lot more sophisticated than just that?
I mean, it's crime. There's all sorts of levels of sophistication. Sometimes it's the unsophisticated that works. Sometimes it's the sophisticated. But also the line is blurred. Where does crime stop and cybercrime start? You know, confidence tricks now are cyber enabled and done over the internet. Does that make it cybercrime, or is it just crime? So there's really the full gamut. On the high end, I think the level of sophistication is much higher than it used to be, just because of the democratization of hacking techniques and tools. Certainly when I started, it was a niche industry with very few people who understand it. Now you can go onto YouTube and teach yourself how to do these things, and the criminals have followed suit with that. So there's definitely an increase in sophistication year on year.
Yeah, and I want to sort of talk to you about both ends. How I don't want to say how well our cyber criminals do in South Africa, but perhaps how sophisticated we are insofar as the level of cybercrime taking place here in South Africa versus the rest of the world.
You know, on the very high end, that's where you get supposedly nation-state-backed hackers engaging in very sophisticated espionage and other things. I think we see less of that here, sort of in line with our standing geopolitically. I think there's actual conflicts going on in other parts of the world where sort of state-backed activity is going to be more intensely focused. And so you see slightly less sophistication there. I think from what we call cyber extortion actors, the people behind ransomware, they are fairly sophisticated, but they're using a common bag of tricks. A lot of the time it's opportunistic. They're looking in particular areas. So it's not that they can go into any organization and breeze through them. They've got this bag of tricks, and where it works right now is where they're going to end up opportunistically targeting. And then on the low end, you've got the criminals. The most common cybercrime that I think we all experience and our friends and family experience, it's not that sophisticated. It's en masse, and it's not even that targeted. So snatch a phone if you can, and then see, can you trick somebody into giving the PIN number for it so that you can get access to the bank account and drain it. Send somebody an email once you've got access to their inbox, changing the banking account details for your home loan, or a car payment you're about to make so that's paid into the wrong account. A lot of that stuff's not particularly sophisticated, but it is sort of productionized, and it's being run by criminal syndicates who see this as a valuable source of income.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we talk about fighting cybercrime, what's our capability? And when we talk about fighting cybercrime, it's also about whether people are savvy enough to recognize the kind of even low-level cybercrime taking place, the snatching of your phone, whether a friend is supposedly sending a text message asking for money. So that's on the one hand. Consumers need to be, aware, and they need to be sort of savvy when it comes to that kind of thing. But then on the other hand, in terms of fighting crime, what's our capability as a country? I mean, as an organization, and there are probably other organizations like yours, that's one thing. But our law enforcement agencies and their capabilities, where are we at globally?
Okay, so I think there's two things in response to that. The one is the difficulty in fighting this kind of crime, and the other is our capability. I'm going to start with the latter first. So the difficulty with this crime is, if you have your cell phone stolen and money stolen, you can go and report that to a police station. But that needs to be rolled up into a bunch of attributed cases that belong to a particular criminal syndicate for there to be a big mass action targeting that syndicate. So you have to attribute all of these individual losses up there, which is dogged police work. It's collaboration with international law enforcement partners to go after these big syndicates that are operating these productionized networks. And I don't think any country is prepared to go after a syndicate operating borderless crimes globally. Are you arresting people in South Africa who are targeting South Africans, or are you arresting people in South Africa who are conducting attacks all over the world? South Africa is affected on both ends of that scale. So you have to collaborate with international law enforcement. It's even what we see from well-funded law enforcement departments internationally, is that this is a multinational collaborative affair. So the better South Africa can collaborate with its international law enforcement counterparts, I think the better prepared we will be here. And that sort of stands at odds with the way the geopolitics of the world are going at the moment, where there's sort of increasing balkanization of states, that they're only allowed to cooperate with certain other states who are in favor or out of favor. Law enforcement can't operate that way. And the more our law enforcement is plugged in, which is why it's great to see the Interpol meeting happening today, the better capability we have.
I mean, it's essential, isn't it, when it comes to things like the man who was arrested in Midrand last week in possession of hundreds of electronic devices, hundreds of thousands of images of child pornography, images and videos stored on those devices. So given the nature of that kind of crime, there has to be collaboration.
Absolutely. And, I think the police people on the scene were saying that it's a borderless crime. It's almost meaningless to go, what was the nationality of the victims in this particular case? We absolutely have a general interest in getting people like that in our society put into prison. And to send that message to others that if you engage in this sort of stuff, there will be consequences for that. And so it was wonderful that we got tip-offs from international law enforcement partners supposedly there. That's the kind of collaboration we want, so that people who engage in those sort of activities know that there's nowhere on earth they can go without risking arrest and prosecution.
Yeah, you mentioned the Hawks and that hosting of this high-level delegation of Interpol this morning, strengthening the fight against crime, especially cybercrime, through partnership and collaboration. That's according to the media statement. So aside from what we've just discussed, insofar as this child porn arrest is concerned, aside from that kind of obvious collaboration, how else can we collaborate when it comes to cybercrime?
There's multiple ways we can collaborate. The one I spend a lot of time on is trying to get private industry to collaborate. There's a lot of people that work in the cyber defense side of things who work very hard to try and detect and block attacks, but don't take it further to try and work with law enforcement partners to affect consequences upon the criminals doing these things, because the majority of the population are not criminals. You can have a meaningful impact on crime by targeting the few people that are. So I think that's one of the biggest things we can unlock in South Africa. We have within our private industry very sophisticated cyber defense capability, very smart and capable people, well-funded, who, if they can collaborate more with law enforcement and law enforcement can collaborate with them, can be very effective. And then I think it's to build those relationships, which Interpol obviously serves a vital way of doing. As much as there might be formal methods of communication, it's having your partner in another jurisdiction on WhatsApp with a strong enough relationship that you can move quickly to affect some outcomes, to secure some evidence, things like that. I'm not in law enforcement, so it's not my area of expertise, but that's what I see people looking for to try and create effective outcomes.
And then just the last comment from you, Dominic. How vulnerable are we in South Africa, both on the end of consumers falling for phishing scams, falling for these text messages that come through that want you to pay minimal amounts of money, but all you need to do is click this link for a package that you've never ordered, and then on the higher end, our companies and their preparedness for a cybercrime attack?
So I think we're about as vulnerable as anyone else on an individual level. We have access for the most part to the same technology as other people in the world, and we end up as vulnerable as others. But this does tend to follow the size of the economies. So when you look at the few stats that do come out, there's far more cybercrime, both at an individual and business level, affecting America than there is South Africa. And that's kind of in line with the fact America has a much larger economy, and so there'll be both more criminals operating there and targeting there than in South Africa. But there is absolutely much more cybercrime in South Africa than there seems to be in other parts of Africa. Again, this is off the limited reporting we see. So there's a little bit of who the criminals choose to target that matters in how vulnerable we are here. Our banks are very sophisticated. We're very blessed to have banks that have invested so much in cybersecurity for so long. So that's why a lot of the time this fraud is focused on tricking the end user into doing things.